Hey everybody, it's Amber here with Tune In Tuesday for Hope, Healing Our Past Experiences. And I just want to welcome you back again this week as we discuss the tough stuff, answer your questions, and share stories of hope. And so as I was preparing for this week, I had this phrase that I've heard many times said, good grief, right? And so we've heard that said many different times, or at least I have throughout my life, where people would use that and they would just be like, it would be a statement they would make, like good grief, like oh my goodness kind of thing. And so I actually was processing that because I had been talking to several ladies lately who are processing grief, right? And have we ever thought about that grief could actually be good? I hadn't, right? And so I had this thought over the last week that I've just really been mulling around and thinking about. And so some of the examples that I want to talk about good grief, as in a good thing that we're grieving, is when we are grieving the loss of a relationship that is not healthy for us. So one example that I have is a woman that I was talking to this last week, and so she was in a relationship with somebody who had made themselves from the outside look really good, like a Marine, in a position at his church, he's a firefighter, but really he had behind the scenes been crossing boundaries, taking advantage of her, raping her inside of a relationship, and just all these different things. And so I encourage her to have healthy boundaries. I encourage her to put those boundaries in place because she's worth setting boundaries and she's worth having healthy relationships. But what you don't understand is, like, this isn't her first relationship. And so it's been a cycle of things that have been going on throughout her life. And now she doesn't even know what it's like to have a healthy, honorable relationship in her life. And so I am so proud of her and so excited for her that she closed that relationship. She's putting healthy boundaries in place, and she knows that that doesn't just affect her, but that affects her children, and they're going to be seeing a new normal being set in place. And I also think about another woman that I talked to this past week who her father passed away last month, and as long as her father was living, she had kind of kept silent about the pain that had happened inside of her family. Her brother had perpetrated her and had harmed her, and she didn't want to break her father's heart. And in that, like, her mom knew what was going on, and her mom is not a healthy relationship for her at all. And so she's figuring out how to navigate and to have healthy boundaries in that relationship. So she's grieving the loss of her relationship with her father, but also the loss of the relationship that should have been with her mother. See, her mother should have been there for her. Her mother should have been a mom. Her mother should have putting her as a priority in her life, and she didn't, right? And so when I'm thinking of good grief, right, I'm thinking of, we're finally acknowledging that it's okay to grieve the loss of our innocence as a child, right? Because then we realize, yes, it happened. No, I did not have any control over it. And sometimes it's a good thing to grieve relationships that are not healthy for us, so that we can make room for those relationships that are healthy, right? Because even when boundaries have been crossed early in our life, don't settle. Don't settle for this cycle of unhealthy relationships one after another, whether it be with a significant other or friends or, faculty and staff and things like that. Don't settle. Like, you're worth more. And so one, if you've had the loss of innocence as a child, that's something that you need to realize, that, like, you need to grieve that. Like, yes, your part of your childhood was taken from you. It's okay to acknowledge that, grieve that, and then we're moving forward because we're owning that, and that's part of your responsibility. Is you're responsible for healing. You're not responsible for what happened, but you are responsible for healing, and you have to take ownership in that. When you're grieving the loss of relationships, give yourself some time, because it's going to take time to put those healthy boundaries in place. And when you put them in place, others aren't going to like them. Guess what? They're not necessarily for them. They're for you and for your children and for your immediate family. And sometimes I'm talking like husband, wife, children, immediate family. That might be your safety unit. It might not include your mom and your dad. I had to put safety measures in place with my biological dad, right? Because he hurt me. He crossed boundaries at a very early age with me, and then he continued to show that he was not a changed man, right? And so that wasn't easy, but it was necessary so that I could heal and so that my family could be healthy, and I was creating a safe environment for us to be able to heal and proceed, right? Because we don't stay wounded. We only stay wounded if we don't address the issue. And so when you have had boundaries crossed with you, your soul has been wounded. And whether or not you're going to own that, whether or not you're going to address that, it's going to stay a wound until you intentionally begin to heal that, right? And so I just want to encourage you today to good grief, right? Like, it's okay to grieve, but I want you to own those relationships that you know are not healthy, and maybe you need to cut some ties. And so until next week, I'll see you guys then. Thanks.